Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our last video here, video number 3 on your practice test. This is the final video. In order to save some time, I actually went through and kind of solved all these problems already, so we're just going to kind of talk about what went through my head when I did them and how I got the answers I got. For A, B, and C, you have to take your exponent and divide it by 4. Dividing it by 4 and looking at the remainders. So you'll notice down here I did the division, and all I did was I wrote down the remainders. So for this one divided by 4, I ended up with a 0.25 remainder. This one ended up with 0.5, and this one ended up with no remainder. There actually was 0 remainder over here. Okay, basically the decimal that follows is what you're looking at. And you want to correlate this to the fraction out of 4. So 0.25 is 1 out of 4, meaning you're on step 1 of the pattern, so that this actually equals I. Over here, if I divide this, I get 0.5, meaning I'm on step 2 out of 4 of the pattern, which means that's -1. And on this one, divided by 4, I get a remainder of 0. I'm on step 4 out of 4 of the pattern, and I get 1. If I had gotten a 0.75, aka step 3 out of 4 of the pattern, then I know that it's -I as my answer. Okay, so those are the things I'm looking for. Should have had I, -1, and 1. When you go to multiply two complex numbers that have imaginary components, you want to make sure that you FOIL. You can see I went ahead and drew my lines here for FOIL. Please make sure that you remember to do this tomorrow. I know some of you in the past have kind of skipped over FOILing. It's a little more obvious when you see it in this form, but I just want to make sure that you remember to do it. Also remember that after you FOIL, it's not like a quadratic where you just combine these together and you're good to go. You also have this I squared over here, which becomes -1. So you have to remember to actually multiply that number by -1 and then combine it with the first term. In this case, I get a positive 133. I add to 18, I get 151. And then I add these together, I get plus 15I. Last two things I have down here are the division problems. Remember that division with complex numbers is not even really division. It's more like multiplying to rationalize a denominator. In this case, we're going to be multiplying by what's called the complex conjugate. That's when you take that imaginary component, whatever it is, and you change the sign, and you keep the real component of your number the same. And we multiply by a giant 1 of the complex conjugate. So, for example, my denominator in this one was 5 minus 16i. The complex conjugate of that, it's a hard word to say, is 5 plus 16i. And I can see I'm doing 5 plus 16i over 5 plus 16i and multiply by that. I go ahead and multiply, do my thing, do a lot of simplifying. So again, I squareds need to become -1. Combine those with these terms, and you end up with -103 plus 120i over 281. Not the nicest answer in the world, but it's the one that we get. Over here, I'll do the same thing. I have -9 plus 21i. I'll multiply by -9 minus 21i. Remember, the reasoning behind the complex conjugate is that when we multiply by it, we will always end up with a real number because we're creating a difference of squares. Okay, we are creating that middle term disappearing. And when that middle term disappears, we then get rid of all the terms that have just a single I in them, and we have all real components left over. Remember, again, that I squared is -1, so you have to use that. You should end up with this one with -291 minus 99i over 522. Hopefully, if you got those answers, you are now completely finished with your practice test. So, I know I'm not here today. Your whole goal is to make sure that you are okay with all of this stuff that's on here. If you have anything that you are struggling with, so you go through and let's say that some of these I problems are messing you up, or let's say it's completing the square, or factoring, or the quadratic formula, star that on your practice test so that tonight when you go home, you know exactly what kind of problems you need to look at. You can always go back in your notes and look for some problems we've done before. You can look in the book. There's a lot of extra problems we have not done that correlate with some of this information. So you can go in there, floating around chapter 1 and 2 and find some stuff on quadratics. If you look on MMS and look at some of your past homeworks, those pages have a lot of problems that we haven't done that could help you out. You also can redo some of these problems. Let's say you did number 15, you couldn't figure it out, and you watched the video and got it. Then tonight, rewrite number 15 on another piece of paper and try it out. You'll have the answer there to check later. Okay, so just some study tips for tonight. Make sure you're ready to go for tomorrow. I will be there to answer some of your last-minute questions, but then we're going to truck forward and take the test. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this.